you ever had this thought? If I just buy this one more thing, then I'll finally feel complete. I won't need any more. I'll be done. That one more pair of shoes, that one more watch, purse, whatever it is. Once you have it, everything will settle down. You'll feel calmer, more fulfilled, and life will finally begin. Well, that's the trap that most of us fall into at some point in our lives that I want to talk about today. Because as a psychiatrist, I often work with people whose lives have been quietly and sometimes completely derailed by this very belief. The belief that contentment is just one purchase away. But before we go any further, for those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. I'm Dr. Robert. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist. And here's what I want to talk about today. First, I'll talk about what compulsive buying actually is and why in the modern world, many of us don't actually fall into that category, but have some traces of it. Then I'll tell you the story about a patient whose compulsive pen buying nearly ruined his life. Now I notice the same pitfalls and beliefs popping up in my own life. And finally, I'll share with you the tools to quiet this tendency. Not just with buying, but with any urge that comes up in life that makes us believe if we just give in this one time, we'll be done. Because as you know, that's not how it ever works. And definitely stick around to the end because I'll give you the tools that I give my patients to help with that urge, that belief that if I just give in to this urge one more time, I'll be complete. So first off, let me clarify what compulsive buying actually is. It's not going on the occasional splurge or collecting or liking nice things. It's when buying becomes a way of regulating your emotional state. It's when the urge to buy something shows up with a sense of tension, restlessness, and a sense of lacking something. And here's the uncomfortable truth. In today's modern world, most of us experience this at some point. And yes, most of you may have guessed that's because we live in a fine-tuned world of algorithms. We're surrounded by them. These giant companies constantly working on figuring out what it is that we want and making us want it more and feel incomplete without. Just think about it, right? We're all constantly bombarded with these messages of other people are enjoying this, you're missing out on this, this would make you feel much better. And all you gotta do, just make that one purchase and we'll be good. And so here, my friends, I'll admit, definitely have a collector's tendency. I'm a person that, even looking back at my early childhood, I was always obsessed with action figures when I was a little kid. Then that transitioned to, you guys remember Yu-Gi-Oh cards? Now there were Pokemon cards, or the kids that were really into those. I was definitely a lot more into Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I felt, I always wanted to buy more packs, collect more cards. And I always had this sensation of, oh, if I just get this one more card, my collection, my deck will be complete. But then I'd get that card and sure enough, I'd move on to the next card, the next things I wanted to get. Of course, as time went on, this evolved from Yu-Gi-Oh cards to Legos, video games, then books, vinyl records. I definitely have way too many books and vinyl records, but that's for another day. And to be clear, all of those things I bought, I don't regret any of that. I had a good time doing it and it created a lot of meaning and purpose in my life, especially throughout childhood. It was a lot of fun. But I think, especially in adulthood, as I got into other collections and things like that, and I started treating people with true compulsive buying disorders, I started to connect this common theme that shows up, I think, in most of our lives. And that's the sense of incompleteness. Like we can't fully appreciate what we have right now and gain a lot of meaning from that. There's always this urge of, let's get a little bit more. What's the next thing? This was also around the time that I was treating a patient. I'll call him Matt. And of course, all identifying details completely changed to protect privacy. And Matt was someone who was really struggling with collecting. Specifically, he was collecting pens. Not cheap pens like this, but also he probably wouldn't have thought much of this pen, but like fountain pens. The old school kind of thing you fill up with ink, write with, and you don't have to toss away once it runs out of ink. You just refill it. He really was fascinated by them, but to the point that he had to come seek treatment from us in the psychiatry department for this interest, this collecting hobby. So why was that? Well, what happened with Matt is kind of like myself. He was always into collecting things, maybe to a more intense degree than I ever was. But that was always a part of his life. He always liked collecting things. And then around high school, he really got into fountain pens. Originally, it was because he enjoyed calligraphy. It was something his father enjoyed. His father collected some pens, not that many, but had some. So he was exposed to it, and he really enjoyed the feeling of writing with them, learning about various types of pen, and got into the collecting hobby, all very innocent enough. But as time went on, he found that he was already kind of an anxious guy, and he often found a lot of refuge in thinking about the next pen. And instead of worrying about some other anxiety that was even more distressing, he could channel in all of his efforts, all of his emotion towards, I want to focus on this next purchase. And once I have that, All of my anxiety, all of the tension I'm feeling in my body, in my mind will all go away. And so he would focus on that, and he would make that purchase, and he would feel the relief. He would feel better. Life would be content. But as I know you can predict this story, that was only short-lived. Soon enough, he was on to the next pen, and on to the next, and the next. And after a few years of this, he was in a lot of debt. He was struggling with his job even because he was spending a lot of time worrying about the next purchase. How will I finance the next purchase? He wasn't able to spend time with friends because he was too focused on how can I get more pens? How can I focus in more on this? It just started to eat more and more of his life away. His life had been shrunk down to one single question. Which pen will finally complete me? So let's take a quick step back as to why no pen will actually ever make Matt feel complete, at least not the way he's going about it now. Because the urge to buy something is very similar, if not almost identical, to any form of anxiety. There is a sense of urge, internal restlessness, a discomfort. Then there's an action that we do to relieve it, and that provides relief. And then that anxiety eventually does come back, and our brains have been primed to reach for that same behavior, that same compulsion to relieve that stress, that anxiety, and give that relief to tension. And so that cycle continues. We've just fallen into another dopamine trap that we're so vulnerable to. And this begs the important question. Why don't we ever sustain that meaningful, consistent level of completeness after a purchase? What does completeness even actually mean? So bear with me here because I'm going to explain some very important and very applicable therapy tools that you can apply to your life no matter the source of discomfort, urge, or distress. An away move is a behavior that you engage in that takes you away from some degree of discomfort and in the short term provides some relief, but also in the long term gets you away from your values, from the life you actually want to live. So for Matt, this was planning for and completing his next purchase. And a toward move is a behavior that gets us closer to our long-term goals and is in line with our values, even if in the short term it is a little bit uncomfortable or doesn't necessarily feel very good. That's because toward moves don't always provide immediate relief, but they always lead us towards feeling more fulfilled. And for Matt, unfortunately, his life had swayed very disproportionately towards one large away move, buying things, and not very many toward moves. So for Matt, the early toward moves were he enjoyed calligraphy, he enjoyed writing, he enjoyed journaling, he enjoyed writing poems, short stories, all by hand because it allowed him to slow down and think and focus on an art form, right? A craft, calligraphy. He also enjoyed meeting up with other people with a shared interest and hobby, and that brought meaning to him as well. So collecting pens wasn't a bad thing for him. It was the compulsive nature that had taken over the hobby that was. So after this, the first thing we did was instead of focusing on stopping the urge, we just focused on noticing it. So his first homework assignments were whenever the urge to research pens, buy pens came up, we would ask him to sit down, take out his favorite pen and start writing in a journal. What is it that I'm feeling right now? What urge, what anxiety, what source of restlessness is driving my desire to do this? What am I getting away from? So these were things where we started to introduce things he used to care a lot more about. And that was guitar. He liked sports actually. He was an avid soccer player, liked watching soccer. So getting back into a soccer club, going to games, going to local games, going to sports bars with friends that he hadn't spoken to in a while to watch games. Basically reconnecting with other parts of life and fortifying them. Creating this repertoire of toward moves that he can always reach for if this urgency, discomfort comes up. So let's take the lessons learned from Matt's case and apply it to other parts of life where an urge or a sense of lacking completeness may come up and cause discomfort, lack of appreciation for you. So as with Matt's case, first step is taking stock. Where in my life does this come up? What sort of areas of purchasing things or just urges, compulsions come up for me that I feel like assuage my anxiety, my stress, my boredom for a short while, but then I feel bad about afterwards. Listing that out can be a very good first step. And next, when the urge comes up, name it. And then try to reflect on what am I trying to escape? Is it loneliness? Is it boredom, discomfort, uncertainty? What other sort of negative emotion is fueling this? And definitely don't underestimate the power of boredom. I do find that for most people, compulsive behaviors are really fueled by a sense of boredom. So then once you're able to notice that urge and what's driving it, then the next step is sitting with it. Even for a moment, telling yourself, hey, next 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, I'm just gonna sit here with that urge. I'm just not gonna obey it. I'm just gonna, maybe in a few minutes I'll give in, but right now I'm just gonna sit here. I'm gonna allow it to exist and I'm not going to obey. This teaches your brain something very important. I can tolerate discomfort. That's not deprivation, that's freedom. And then you want to choose a toward move to engage in. And oftentimes this also takes some work of figuring out and listing out what are some good toward moves I can always reach for. So perhaps doing something creative instead of consuming, connecting with people instead of endlessly scrolling, appreciating rather than acquiring. Find some things that create long-lasting meaning in your life. So remember, the urge to buy promises relief. Toward moves offer meaning. And meaning, not relief, is what actually makes us feel whole. So definitely, my friends, don't outsource your sense of wholeness, completeness to a shopping cart. My friends, if you've ever felt incomplete about something, craving something, feeling like you won't be whole until you obtain it, or missing out on something, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks.